So I do have two groups on here. So there's a group that's a cohort of students that's finishing up, and there's a cohort of students that are kind of still in the midst of everything. So sometimes just remember that. Sometimes I'll say things that may or may not apply to where you're at. Um, so don't forget all the online courses, whichever cohort you're in. All those classes are out there. It's 5 classes. So some of y'all should be on the second, and some of y'all should be on the 4th or 5th. So I think everybody, just depending on which cohort. So the cohort that's fixing to finish the summer should be on the 5th course. And the cohort that's, still got another year plus, should be on the 2nd course. And fixing to go into the 3rd course. I haven't got the third course is ready. I think I need to let people know it's ready. So, all right. So today, unless there's other questions about, any things, I'm gonna get started. We can always have questions later. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about weed control for vineyards. So we spend a lot of time talking about lots of different things in the vineyards, and they all need to be, most things are important in a vineyard. And if you ignore them, you'll pay some sort of price. And we talk a lot about diseases, but we don't talk a lot about weed control as much. Don't know why, because it's at least as important as anything else that we're doing. And of course, there's lots of things to do in a vineyard. So if you want to lose all your free time, you can have a vineyard. So because there's it's always something to do. So I won't go there. So and oftentimes, beautiful vineyards look beautiful because things are taken care of. And so this is a beautiful vineyard that has been taken care of. So weeds are under control. So that makes it look even better. I'll show you some pictures of people that haven't taken care of their weeds. So just a little bit of background as far as what happens when you have weeds. So a couple of studies out there have shown that, not surprisingly, you could have yield reduction almost 50%, a third to 50 roughly. Also a reduction in cluster number, not cluster size, but actual numbers of clusters. So once again, probably water and nutrients going to weeds that can impact yield. And then a 68% to 317% reduction in cane waste. So canes are those shoots that have been matured, and at the at the end of the growing season, shoots turn into canes, and then we can measure those canes during the growing season. And so that often means, cane weights are a good indicator of how the vine is growing. And so if you don't have very large shoots, you may not be able to support all the fruit they have on there. And so that could cause other issues as far as maturing crops. So we often, we tend to look at things either black or white. And so weeds in and of themselves aren't necessarily bad. And some places don't do a lot of weed control because they're trying to use weeds and or what you would call a cover crop underneath the vines to slow the vines down. I'm going to say that's somewhat not the case in Texas, or other places that are semi-arid. So, or So, but that, you know, we kind of have that pendulum of, you know, there are different ways to control weeds. So, but whatever it is, we probably need to realize that they can have an impact on yield as well as vine growth. So lots of different ways to manage weeds. I didn't put on here one thing that is somewhat catching on, I guess. So and I'll talk about that. So just briefly. So we do have mechanized undervine cultivators. So really what we're worried about are the weeds in the vine row. We're not really worried about weeds in the vine middle because we have lots of different ways that we can manage those weeds, whether it's mowing or tillage or some combination thereof. There are flame cultivators out there. They're not used much, and of course we can do things by hand. Mulching is an option, although it's economically it's a little tough to do. And then the other thing I'm going to throw out there is sheep, and so that's kind of a buzzy thing right now. To have animals in your vineyard is great. You probably need to plan to have animals in your vineyard before you go off and do it. And the other thing is, you know, if you have animals, that's just a whole nother level of things you have to do to take care of them. Even if somebody else owns the animals, you're probably gonna have to be responsible for some of the things like fencing and watering. So having grown up around goats, it's you know, it's a whole nother level of things to keep track of. So not discouraging it, but sometimes people think it looks great, but it's just more work. So, but lots of people are kind of into that concept. So, and if you are, you need to really think about it and plan ahead. So, also we have herbicides that will control weeds, and so we'll talk about those. Those are an option for smaller growers, in particular because they're less expensive than some of the other options. So when we look at weed control, it's always better, almost any kind of pest that we're dealing with, we want to look at multiple ways of doing the same. You know, we shouldn't be tied to just one way of doing things. We should look at different options. And usually we talk about integrated pest management as one of those things. And so integrated weed management, you know, if you were to talk to a row crop grower, cotton grower, corn grower, you know, this list would be exactly the same as in a vineyard. So first of all, you need to know what your weed problems are. So there are lots of ways to figure that out now, more so than maybe in the past. And so that helps us when we know what we're dealing with, then that kind of helps us understand, you know, the plant and how to control it and when to control it. Almost always we want to control weeds when they're small. Yes, you can kill weeds in a variety of ways when they're 3 feet tall, but lots of things have already happened since then. Weeds are very competitive, and so they probably already utilized a lot of water, nutrients when they get to that point. The other thing is, especially with annual weeds, we want to keep them from going to seed, and people refer to that as the weed seed bank. So when you let weeds go to seed, usually they produce a lot of seeds, and those seeds are depending on the weed, they may be viable for many years. Some of them are not viable for longer. You know, some of them don't have that capability, but some of them do. So the other thing, if we're using herbicides, it would probably be wise to either rotate different herbicides or tank mix multiple herbicides with different modes of action into that spray. So the reason we do that is almost always not, as is the case with diseases, every control mechanism has a little bit different. They'll control certain diseases, but not other diseases. Same thing with herbicides; they will control certain certain weeds, but not other weeds. So, and then the other reason we're doing this is for resistance management. We don't talk a lot about resistance management with weed control and herbicides. We talk a lot about resistance management with fungicides, but we have a similar issue. There are weeds that are resistant in the state of Texas to certain herbicides, and so we could and should expect to see some of those weeds in the in a vineyard. So you need to pay attention to that, and we don't want to make the problem worse. Almost always it's helpful to stay clean. So in other words, if whichever way we do that, if we this is very similar to disease control. If you start clean, you typically have a better chance of finishing clean. And so sometimes pre-emergent herbicides, we might call those residual herbicides, would be a pretty useful tool. And the other thing that we'll pay attention to would be to, if something doesn't work, we probably need to control those weed escapes, whether that's by hand labor or by spot spraying. Those would be things that we pay attention to. Cultivation. So obviously we can use cultivation in the row middles, or we can use mowing, but there is also in-row possibilities now. And so I put if feasible, and we'll talk about how some things are feasible and some things are not. And then the other thing is the being able to mulch under row, so that can help with weed control, so it's no longer a bare surface, and help with other things as well. Now the problem with this is to really effectively do this on any kind of scale, you need a lot of mulch, and then you need some way to apply it, which really means, wouldn't it be great if you had a way to mulch, put the mulch under the row automatically, and they make those items, but once again, that's another investment, and that may that investment may make things less feasible financially. So okay, so here's some small weeds. So and that's kind of the target. We want weeds less than 6 inches tall, so that would be a good target. And this is a pigweed. So it's probably a red root pigweed, and it's knocking on 4 feet tall. So that is not what we're after. So, and I will proudly claim this weed. So that's my weed. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about mechanical cultivation and some of its limitations and some of its good points. So this is a weed. This is a mechanical cultivator, one-sided cultivator that we have at the school. So this little bar knifing thing, so many words I can use to describe how that thing works. So basically it undercuts the weeds like a lot of cultivator sweeps do, and kills the weeds. It does have a mechanism where when it hits something like a vine, it will swing out of the way. So that's what that little stainless steel bar is. So it's a trigger so that it will go further into and underneath the vines. So a couple things about this machine is so It is run by PTO, so it has hydraulics. But then also it has electronic controls. So if you need to override something and swing it out of the way, you can do that in the cab electronically. So it's got two systems there, and two systems, multiply the chances of you having some sort of problem. So, and then the other problem is because it's a fairly complicated machine, is it's rather costly. So, and maybe man, that's not working. And maybe shockingly so. So, any guesses on what this thing cost? And I think we got a pretty good deal. I don't know.
600.
16,000?
Okay, so 16,000 is pretty close. So this thing is $17,000.
Oof.
And that's only one side. That's not doing two sides at one time, which is maybe for the best. I don't know. So most small vineyards are going to have trouble really swinging that. So even some large vineyards are going to have trouble swinging that. So there's that issue. So and of course, there's lots of possibility to do damage to the vineyard and vines, especially if you have an operator that's not paying attention. Or there's a lot, you have to pay attention when you're with none of this is auto steer necessarily. I guess it could be, but so anyway, so there's that particular challenge. That's when I talk about, feasibility may be a little bit more difficult. So another less expensive operation that doesn't involve hydraulics and doesn't involve any electricity is a finger weeder. So this one is much cheaper, although still not necessarily inexpensive. It's possible that you could get just the unit itself for, I haven't checked prices lately, but it's possible that you could get it maybe let's just say $6,000 range, which is still a lot of money, but much less than 17,000 and a little bit more simpler. So it's got the kind of like similarities to a rotary hoe. So it's got a rotary hoe gang up here. We've got several of those that work in an opposite direction to kind of pull the weeds up. And then it's got the finger weeder, which turns. It's got little, having word finding problems this day. I think the heat, blame it on the heat. It's got little, anyway, it's got things that make it turn that stick into the ground. So it makes these little weed, makes the finger weeder spin. So, and so I belong to a vineyard co-op, and so they actually bought one and can rent it out. So that way you're not buying the entire thing. So, so there's a lot. So think about those options as well. And fairly effective, not perfect. So I'm gonna show you a video. Maybe I'll show you a video. Loving technology today. Let's see. It worked when I tried it.
Maybe you can just open up your YouTube
That's what I'm doing.
and
So
go through your history. Yeah, sharing your screen, it ought to show us.
that's why I never put videos in. Why I never put videos in PowerPoint.
I don't blame you.
If you hold down Control and click on it, it might launch it.
Okay, so these are young vines. Let's see. Can y'all see that? Probably not. Okay, so you should be able to see that now. So these are young, these are vines that are being retrained. So I'm not trying to get every single weed. But and I'll show it a couple times and I'll Okay, so doing a fairly effective job. So that was after rainfall. So it did not work very well when it was drier to pull out some of the weeds. The other thing to point out is that the little rotary hoe gang in front was completely full of weeds. And so at some point, you know, it really so far from perfect, but an option to help. And here's the results after the weeder's been run on both sides. And once again, left lots of weeds, but it's better, you know, better than it was. And so you could go back and maybe spray out those weeds. So the other particular issue is my toolbar wasn't wide enough to stick it any further out. So anyway. So if these were mature vines, maybe I could have done something a little bit different. So okay. So let's talk a little bit about chemical weed control with herbicides. So we have a wide variety of equipment options to do that with. We have a relatively wide time window to treat, although you could argue that maybe we don't, but normally they can be effective. And there is a chance of herbicide injury, and we have to pay attention to that. Once again, we want to control weeds early in the season. So you can see that clearly these weeds are much bigger than they should be. So position, heal thyself there. So those are my weeds. All right. So there are a large number of potential herbicides that you can use. Now these are post-emergent herbicides. If we look at other crops, it's probably a much smaller list than we have of row crops. So there's glyphosate, which is known as Roundup, but it has many other names out there. So it is a fairly effective product, and it does move well in weed plants. But also we have to be careful around grapevines. In fact, I tend to not even use it. During the growing season. So it's a good one to use in the dormant season, but makes me nervous to use it when we have lots of green tissue out there. There's been some controversy with glyphosate. And so some people would like to not use it, and that's certainly possible and feasible. So I won't go down that rabbit hole tonight. Glufosinate, which is known as Rely 280, Forfeit 280, lots of different generic products out there. It's a one that I would use in the growing season more so. So it's more of a contact herbicide and relatively low risk of resistance. There is a product out there that's a restricted use pesticide that people are moving away from. So that's Paraquat. And then we have a couple that are either either work on grasses only or work on broadleaf weeds only. So those are listed, and we'll talk more about those coming up. And when we look at using herbicides, post-emergent herbicides, we want to control weeds. This is when after they emerge, and we want them to be relatively small once again. And usually herbicides may require surfactants or other additives to be most effective. Those are usually spelled out in the label, but there's lots of little things that help that may not necessarily be on the label. And they can cause injury to the crop. At least some of them can. So always read the label and understand what it is you're working with. So just when you go buy things and you say, I want some Rely 280, make sure you get Rely 280. There are products out there that have similar names. One of them is called Remedy, and it's a brush herbicide. And when you spray Remedy around grapes, good things do not happen. And so had a student where that happened, they just took what the retailer gave them without really paying attention to it. So anyway, just pay attention to those kind of things.
Kurt, can
Yes.
I ask a question about that? Because I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I'm there, I'm asking the dude behind the counter at the at the store, the
Right, who knows less than you do.
the fertilizer joint, who he's
Yeah.
he's there, he's got experience, and he sold me. I went to buy glufosinate the other day, and you know, I'd not heard of the brand. And then, you know, I get it home, I look at it and it says like glufosinate ammonium or something like that. I mean, is that what I want? Is that the right product? I don't know how to know. And
Um,
I'm chicken to use it. So,
yeah, it's fine.
okay.
I mean,
Thanks.
yeah, I mean, sometimes we gloss over some of the, sometimes we gloss over some of the, you know, we shorten things because it's easier, right? So,
Okay. And so how careful do I need to be with overspray? I mean, you're saying that it does not really harm grapevines, but I mean, I don't want to spray it directly on them, or does it matter, or what?
so yeah, so, you know, you don't want to spray the grapevine. You can spray the trunk of the grapevine. You can spray woody parts of the grapevine. How's that? So in
Well,
other
I
words,
don't have woody
if you were to spray your entire grapevine, chances are
parts.
it would die.
I've got newborn baby grapevines, you know what I mean? So, you know, just planted in April. So,
Well, then that kind of brings us to the next thing is hopefully you have like, do you have any kind of grow tubes or
well,
vine protectors?
they're in grow tubes. I'm
Okay,
in the process of removing them because they're as tall as I am now. So I'm
okay.
like, yeah.
Well, we'll spray them before you take the grow tubes off. How's that?
Okay, thanks.
And then that would solve all your problems.
I'll stop taking everybody's time. I'm just so chicken.
So overall, as long as you're not spraying the, as long as you're not spraying the vine down, you're good. So. And so a little bit of drift is not going to cause any problem. So it'll make the leaves spot, and then, you know, that'll be it. So. Okay, so there are a couple of grass herbicides that are registered in grapes, both bearing and non-bearing. And so that is Post and Fusilade. So, and there's probably, I know there's probably generics of Post. So here's what Post will do after, you know, you can spray right over the top of grapevines and kill grasses. So you can see that the grasses are dead. But, you know, just to point out, you know, this little thistle right here, sow thistle, I think, is still alive because it doesn't do anything to broadleaves. So that's a very specific kind of herbicide that works that way. So yeah, we could probably knock this guy because he doesn't have any stakes. He doesn't have any grow tubes. And he could use something cheaper probably than this, but this is, you know, sometimes things happen. So. Okay, there's also post-emergent herbicides that control broadleaf only herbicides. So that is been used in grapes. So those are AIM and Venue. So usually, once again, they're more contact. They work better as contact herbicides. So, and you know, one of the tricks, if you have a lot of broadleaf weeds, is to mix something like AIM with the glufosinate, whether it's Rely 280 or Forfeit 280. So, or any other brand names out there. So, and the AIM is it's like an ounce per acre, and it comes in a little container. So you're not out a lot of money if you want to go that direction. We already talked about protecting young vines, especially first-year-old vines from herbicide drift, whatever it is. So you can spray with herbicides and get close, but you don't really want to touch the green tissue of the trunk. It'll be green for a little bit. So whether they're cardboard boxes or whether other options, those would be good to leave on as long as possible. Okay, so a couple of things to wrap our heads around when it comes to weed spray is typically we are only spraying the weeds underneath the vines. And we talk about that as being a strip spray. Not really a banded spray per se, but it kind of is. It's similar. And so we only spray a percentage of the area. And so if we have a sprayer, so if you have a boom sprayer that you're going to use, which is different from a spot sprayer, and we'll talk about that. You would set it up and calibrate it based on the fact that you're only spraying a percentage of the vineyard acreage. And this is different, if we're looking at doing a sprayer, an air blast sprayer where we're spraying all the foliage. We do that, then we're going to consider that a broadcast treatment, because if you were to lay these vines down, they would cover the ground if that was possible. So that would be a broadcast spray, where would where it says use 6 ounces per acre, you'd use 6 ounces per acre per sprayed acre. So here, in this particular situation, we are going to look at a percentage of the area. So in this particular instance, we have a 10-foot row. We are spraying 3 feet, so 1.5 on either side, and we're leaving 7 feet untreated. And so the broadcast rate on the lower end is 4 quarts per treated acre. And so we're not doing, we're doing 30% of that. So we would be putting down 1.2 quarts of surfland on the treated strips. So 30% is going there. So that's sometimes hard to wrap your head around. So, if you sprayed all of it, you spray 4 quarts per acre, but we're only spraying a portion of it. So we're not going to use 4 quarts. We're going to use the lower amount, which makes it equivalent to the broadcast rate. So a little confusing, I know. So not everybody has a sprayer that's set up to spray that way. And so then we'll talk about a spot spray. So a spot spray is where you mix up so much per gallon of spray solution. And we have a picture of a 4-wheeler with a 25-gallon tank. And so we would fill that up. And I'll show you how we would figure that out. Okay, so here's our glufosinate spot spray rate. So it is 1.7 ounces per gallon. And so 1.7 ounces by 25 gallons would be 43.5 ounces per 25-gallon load. And we would just spray the weeds, we would just wet the weeds down. We don't, need good coverage, but you don't want to overdo it. Okay. So if we're looking at using post-emergent herbicides, there are several adjuvants that would be helpful. Probably the most common one that we use is a surfactant. Drift control agents are nice, especially when we're spraying younger vines, and we'd like to not get any of those drops on there. And then water quality is important, especially with certain herbicides. And so you might use a water conditioner, which they have several different names. And some of these products are available as an all-in-one product. Maybe not every single one of it, not, in other words, you might have a drift control agent and a surfactant mixed together. So that's fairly common to have that. So a drift control adjuvant, when you put it in and mix it, you're going to reduce the number of fine droplets So you can see on the left, we have no drift control adjuvant added. And on the right, we have drift control adjuvant added. And you can see there's many, you can see a visible difference. So fewer fine droplets. That's what the drift control agents do. And they're pretty effective at that and relatively low cost. So. Okay, so the other little tricks here is where they're using glyphosate, like Roundup or glufosinate, like Rely 280 or Orpha 280, is that they are weak acid herbicides. And so weak acid herbicides perform best in water that is neutral to acidic. Water conditioners, which are basically acids, or ammonium sulfate, can lower the pH. And citric acid can lower the pH. So there's different things that you can use to basically reduce the pH of the water. And weak acid herbicides are also antagonized by certain cations in the water. So if you have hard water that has a lot of calcium and sodium in it, that's going to reduce the effectiveness of the herbicides you're using. AMS stands for ammonium sulfate, and ammonium sulfate can overcome these antagonistic cations, and also can improve herbicide movement through the cuticle. So ammonium sulfate is a fertilizer. However, the ammonium sulfate that we're talking about here, it would be a spray grade ammonium sulfate if you were to do it as a dry product. So make sure you get the spray grade. Boy, I can't write very well today. So, which is not the fertilizer grade. So it's like a 99% ammonium sulfate. So anyway, spray grade. And if you go that direction, so there are dry products, and there's also liquid products that are ammonium sulfate. So here is just looking at what ammonium sulfate will do to water. So our starting oil water pH in this situation was 7.4, and we added some dry ammonium sulfate at the equivalent rate of 17 pounds per 100 gallons. And so we reduced our pH to 7.0, which is neutral. So, of course, ammonium sulfate does other things other than just changing the water pH. But I could visually illustrate that with this. And then if we do a commercial water conditioner, so we start out at 7.3 and we add 2 quarts for 100 gallons, and we reduce the water pH to 4.8. So that's a much better situation for the water for those weak acid herbicides. So and everybody, so just, when we talk about surfactants, there's a multitude of brands of surfactants out there. And so they all have different brand names. So that's also confusing. So that means you kind of have to do your homework to figure out what's what. Because sometimes the guy behind at the fertilizer joint does not really, he may not know the difference. So it may be on you to figure out which one's which. So. All right, so we do have some pre-emergent herbicides. So common ones out there are Surflan, Prowl H2O, and then Chateau is also one that's available. And we have to pay attention to lots of things. So pre-harvest intervals are important. Also certain, we want to make sure we don't use chateau on young vines. And most all the pre-emergent herbicides need some sort of rainfall after they're applied in order to be effective as a pre-emergent herbicide. So they have to be moved into the soil somehow. So that's usually with rainfall. So one of the things about Prowl H2O is that it is encapsulated. So while the label says 7 days, you probably have a little bit longer than that. But that's what's on the label. So with pre-emergent herbicides, timing is everything. So we want to make sure that we get the weed seeds controlled prior to germination or as they germinate. So that means that we have to understand when the weed seeds start to germinate, and often it's much earlier than we think it is. So especially some of these spring, summer weeds are going to need to be, we need to be ahead of when they start to germinate. Now we have weeds that will germinate over a long period of time, like the pigweed, and so they'll keep on coming up. So the timing may not be quite so critical. But if we're trying to hit the main flush, we need to be ahead of it. So if we put things out in the fall, we would need to try to do something about that earlier. So
on that previous slide, you were it showed something about rainfall. So is that something that like you want to apply it and you want it to rain in? Is that what that was about? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it quick enough. Okay.
Yeah. So, they tend to break down, herbicides tend to break down for various reasons. Sunlight is one of them. So if they don't get, they start losing, they start not working, they start going away after a certain amount of time. So,
okay. Okay, so we've had 12.5 inches of rain since Memorial Day.
okay. I would take some of that.
Everything that I I just feel like I spray, it rains and rains and rains. And then I finally, get an opportunity to go out there and spray again. And, within, I guess I'm getting probably about 4 hours before the rain. So I'm hoping that some of it's actually working, but I don't know. And I've got these vines in these shelters, and I'm really just afraid there's mildew growing up in them. And so I want to get those off. So what do you think?
Oh man, a lot of stuff there. So, yeah, you can probably have mildew in the grow tubes, depending on what kind they are. But do you really, so those are leaves that are probably going to be taken off or cut off at some point. So stop worrying as much about what's happening in the grow tube. I can't do anything about the rainfall. I would probably say that, do
Yeah.
the best you can. I wouldn't worry about it. They're still young vines, so.
Yeah, but I don't want them to die. They were expensive.
Yes. So, do the best you can. They're probably not going to die. So.
Probably. Okay.
If you get a few mildew spots, it's not the end of the world.
I'm feeling real good about this now.
You can always start over next year.
Okay. I'll try and chill.
I'm going to have you come worry over my vines.
Clearly, I need more experience.
All right, so we had a question about what PHI is, and that's pre-harvest interval. So, if you put out something, whether it's sulfur or just about anything that is a pesticide, even if it's natural, it will have some sort of pre-harvest interval. It may be 0 days, or it could be longer. So that's what that means. Good question. All right, so timing is important. So you typically want to be ahead, and of course, almost except we're trying to control winter weeds. We probably need to be out there in September, October, before they start to flush. So that may or may not be a good time. The problem with spring and summer weeds is usually we're busy doing something in the vineyard, and so something else takes precedence and it doesn't get done timely or at all. So, or maybe somebody has time to get it done. So a rain is required to activate a pre-emergent herbicide to get them into the soil so that it controls the weed seeds. They mostly, for the most part, established perennial weeds are not going to be pre-emergent herbicides are not going to do anything to them. So that means we'll need other things to work on. But if it can save some of your other problems, it would be helpful. I think that's it. We've already had some good questions, so. So, I'm just gonna throw out some brand name products. Nutrien is pretty much across the state. So their water conditioner is called Top Choice Trio, I think. Top Choice Trio. There's a Top Choice. I don't know what the heck the difference is between Top Choice and Top Choice Trio. But anyway. And then I use one of their surfactant products called Compadre. And so it is a drift control agent. It's also a surfactant and also keeps the water. It's an anti-foaming agent. So glufosinate tends to foam a little bit. So this one keeps it from foaming in the spray tank. It's not a commercial, it's not an endorsement. Those are just some brand names, and I use both those products. So for whatever that's worth, but everybody has their own brand of products. And they all have really cool names, so. And the great thing about Compadre is it comes in a 1 gallon container. So you're not buying like a 2.5 gallon jug or something. So. Any other questions?
There's a question in the chat.
Yeah, I don't know about cicadas. I don't think cicadas eat grapevines.
Aren't they a leaf hopper of some kind, or are they
They're
not?
eating my vegetable garden, so I was just curious. I was sitting
Oh,
outside
okay.
and they're so loud. So I'm just curious if you have any like pests in terms of, do you have to control pests as well as weeds, or is that a subject for another day?
Oh, that's another day, but yes, we do have insects. Although, at the end of the day, maybe there's really only 1 or 2 insects that we worry about.
Of course, nematodes,
We have other things, but yeah.
leaf hoppers. Ugh. It's just so hard gardening in Texas. There's so many bugs.
There can be, yes. Nobody said it was easy.
So your grapes, they're not trellised, is that right?
Which grapes are we referring to?
Well, the ones in the picture now are trellis, but earlier you had some photos that it didn't look like they had a trellis system.
I think everything I showed you had some sort of trellis system.
Okay, maybe I missed it. I signed up late. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, that's all right. It's just the vines weren't trained up on the trellis yet, so maybe that was why it didn't appear that they had a trellis. Oh, well, so the other picture, you're talking about this picture. Maybe you're talking about this picture. Not that one, not that one. Maybe you're talking about this one. They didn't have he has end post, but nothing else, so. Not any real trellis system here.
Should we be worried about like the time that these herbicides are active in the environment, or like if it is by a stream, is it gonna do any environmental damage, or is that also again another broader topic that maybe don't be a farmer if you don't want to use pesticides, herbicides?
I would say most of the bad,
Texas.
you can make choices, and most of the choices you're gonna make are they're all relatively safe to the environment.
Okay, cool.
So,
That makes me feel better.
you can make choices to use less harsh herbicides, and there's choices. So, but for the most part, they've been vetted as far as their environmental impacts. So,
What should I spray on sticker burrs?
Oh, they're the worst.
They are. They're hateful.
it's a long-term game, so glufosinate will work pretty well.
Hey, Stephanie, I had sticker burrs in my vineyard really bad. Like we went out there one day and all of a sudden the whole freaking thing was just covered with them, mounds everywhere. So I sprayed them with this was a couple months, like a month or two ago. I sprayed them with some weed killer so they could dry out. And then, we have a smaller vineyard than you, but my husband took a torch and we just burned them. And the torch, like the flame, really only goes to the area that you're actually burning at. So, I felt pretty safe everywhere he was burning, but it burned him to the ground because then it kills the seeds and everything. So that wiped it out. But that's just something that we did.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an option.
Because I tried digging them up and I'm like, I'm done with this. After about an hour of digging with a hoe, I'm done. I'm not doing this. I have, 8 more rows to go and I've covered a half of a row.
Yes, they're awful. Okay. All right, that's good thought. Thanks.
So probably a pre-emergent would help you, like a Surfland or Prowl H2O would help your problem over time as well.
I've been weeding the yard, so this is helpful just to know about leaf, different like grass targeting herbicides. I haven't put the grapes in the ground yet, so I haven't had to weed them, but I'm excited about herbicides now.
Okay. They can be a tool, so.
And Herc, I haven't seen those tables that you had in this presentation. Will we have access to these slides, or, just the tables that you had listed that
Yes,
have
I'll
the,
send this, I'll make the slides available, notes. How's that?
cool. Thanks.
All right.
On another note, when is the next class gonna be available? Are we doing summer class? Is it in the fall?
So, so you're finishing up site assessment? Are you talking about the online courses?
Yes.
Okay, so the next one will be vine nutrition and water management. So. Have you registered for it yet?
No, I'm just ballpark. I'm not done with the second
all right.
class.
Yeah,
Like fall-ish?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Just double checking there wasn't a summer one.
So there is a summer, I mean, I guess that would be the summer one, so.
Oh, okay. So
So,
it's available to register for?
it should be, yes.
Oh, okay. I'll get caught up.
I mean, it's kind of a rolling thing, so whenever you finish the second one, you can move on to the third one.
Oh, okay, got it.
I just want to make sure,
I'm behind.
open up as well, so,
Thanks.
all right, you're welcome.
I just have to brag a little bit, but my grapevine is doing great. The ones that we got from Fredericksburg.
Okay, good to hear.
I thought if I can't keep this one alive, I need to just stop right now.
That's the first step, but sometimes it's hard just to keep one thing alive, but yeah. So, glad to hear you're doing well with it.
Good job. I brought 4 home last year from the class, and they start out looking beautiful. Now they have black rot. I had to drop all the fruit off. It was terrible, and I'm sure they've got PD by now too. Whatever.
It was a good experience.
Oh, it's a great experience.
Okay.
I have very much enjoyed having those practice vines to just to practice pruning and all all the things. So
Okay. Awesome.
I have appreciated having those for
Yeah.
sure. And they're pretty. My friends like to look at them and ooh and all.
Okay. Ooh.
Thanks for giving us more Vedra because I heard that that's the easiest one in Texas.
It is a relatively easy grade to work with, yes. And it's pretty productive, so big clusters, so.
Yeah,
Pretty
dropping
good, right?
fruit off the second year, that's pretty good.
Mine were Tempranillo, and they were laden with fruit, and it hurt my heart to have to cut them all off. But just one day I see some little black spots on the leaves, and I mean in no time flat all over the fruit, everything, just pretty much ruined. So I just cut them off and threw them away. I'm not dealing with this.
Vines look pretty.
But the
Stephanie,
vines.
where's your vineyard?
I'm in Northeast Texas, north of Tyler. I-20.
Y'all got a lot of rain then. Yeah, some
Oh,
lot of bad weather.
Yes, and several of my babies broke off at the top. The tips were broken off because they're they're 2 feet out of the vine shelters now, and they're taking a beating with this weather.
Are you just north of 20, or how far are you from Tyler?
I am 20 miles north of Tyler, right on I-20, just across the Van Zant County line from Smith County, where Tyler is.
Okay. What about that? What's that? Hideaway Lake? What's the lake up there?
I live in Hideaway.
Oh,
That's
I grew
where
up in Tyler.
Okay, me too. Me too. But my practice vines are in my backyard here in Hideaway. And then my real vineyard I planted in April, and that's just over the Van Zant County line. on Garden Valley Road.
Okay, yeah,
Hmm.
cool.
All right. Well, hopefully y'all learned something. So I will post the notes in the discussion posting thing.